Mr. Arnett. I knew it was your son's birthday yesterday, so I was just wondering how was it raising your son since he was a infant.
Well, I was 29 years old when his mother became pregnant with him. And it was just due to a condom break-in, she got pregnant. We weren't even a couple, or we weren't together. She was busy in school and doing other things in her life. She wasn't expecting to get pregnant because neither one of us knew the condom was going to break. So when the condom broke, she got pregnant. She didn't want to get an abortion. I didn't want the abortion. I just told her I would, whether it was a boy or a girl, that I would take the child and raise my child, just knowing that any child of mine would have a better opportunity being raised by me than by his mother. Not any woman, but just that particular situation, I knew that my son or child would have a better opportunity being raised by me than, his mom. So, once she gave birth to him, I was there the whole time she was pregnant. I gave her birth, baby shower. And I was there at the hospital, not to cut the umbilical cord, but she called me when she was in labor. By the time I got down there, my son was already, born. So I wasn't 100% sure that the child was mine during the course of the pregnancy, but once I saw him laying there and saw his features, I looked at his feet, I looked at his hands. I was also described by my mother at what I looked like at birth. When I was born, I looked like a little white baby, and blonde hair, blue eyes. My son was born the same way. He had a blonde hair and he had blue eyes. They then turned gray and then they were brown. So, once she came home from the hospital, she basically I convinced her to let me spend the better part of his life with him, raising him myself. So she was in school and I worked on the day. So we got him in the daycare. At 2 weeks old, he started daycare. And from that point, I would come home from work and I would pick my son up every day from daycare. He spent most weekends with me. He would go spend some weekends at his mother's house. But from 2 weeks old, he spent most of his time being raised by me. I would take him to daycare, pick him up from daycare. And it was fun. It changed my life, that's for sure. The things that I were into, I always had a job. I was a teacher aide disciplinarian inside the juvenile prison system at the time. But then I also had friends that I grew up with, that I hung with, that was part of the underworld. And you know what I mean by the underworld. We took care of things and took care of business on the streets. So I was able to move in both lives, in both worlds. So, I grew up with a group of guys that really raised me, and they were all older than me, most of my friends, and most of my relatives on the male side all have been incarcerated, all have been to prison. I broke that generational curse by not being put in that situation where I had to go to prison. I made sure of that. So then once I had my son and had custody of my son, that just basically, like I said, changed my life, and it changed a lot of things that I was doing, because if I couldn't take my son, I couldn't go, because I now have my son to raise. And I was doing a pretty good job of doing that, seeing him through kindergarten all the way to now. He's 31 years old. He helped build West Philadelphia Produce. He's been featured in a lot of news stories right along with me on this journey that we've taken to build and create West Philadelphia Produce. The actual concept of West Philadelphia Produce was created by my son Devontae. I gave him options on what we could build at this drug location and what we wouldn't build at this drug location. So I gave him a list of what we wouldn't build, which was only 5 things. We wouldn't build a daycare, we wouldn't build a barbershop, a beauty salon, a church, or a bar. Then top of the list was fruit and produce, or things that the community needed. And I just put them in the list and let them pick through the list. And that concept is now our community hub concept, which is a public safety concept, because just by building and adding a fruit and produce store to a location that was nothing but death, we've been able to reduce crime and violence in the community by 46%. We're globally recognized around the world for doing such. And I know doing what we've done here, we've here now 20 years. We brought this location in 2004, me and my son and my daughter as well at the time. I now have 3 children. My son was 1 year old, my oldest to my youngest. So Danny is now 21. They all ran the business for most of the years that we were open. But now, due to the crime and violence, and we're public safety consultants, we're experts on it now, on public safety. Due to the city not taking the recommendations that we were giving the city of Philadelphia when it came to crime and violence, both my sons now live outside the city of Philadelphia. I won't mention where they live at, but they don't live here any longer. And that was due to safety concerns and things like that. The death rate for black men in the city of Philadelphia. My son is a chef. He now works for a big company where he does cybersecurity for them. And my youngest son is now in that same program to become in cybersecurity. So cybersecurity, and he's in that program now so that he can work for the same corporation. He grew up, and they grew up hiring and doing the firing and the hiring. Most of their friends worked and cousins were able to work here. But my approach with my son was basically to keep them from being incarcerated and breaking that generational curse. My father was a career criminal. Both my brothers, which aren't whole brothers, they have different mothers, but we have the same fathers. They've all been to prison. All of my brothers have been to jail. A lot of my nephews have, most of them, cousins. So it's just basically providing my son with the tools and the gifts to not ever go to prison and breaking that generational curse. And I'm just glad that me and my son were able to do that. You know, he's doing well. He's married now. He's been married for 2 years now. He has his own home built from the ground up, and he built this West Philadelphia Produce 20 years ago. We began the concept of reducing crime and violence, shutting down a major heroin and crack network, multi-million-dollar one, which we don't get the credit for that, but we are mentioned and talked about globally for doing such. Here in the city of Philadelphia is something different, but the lives we've been able to save, I wasn't able to do that alone. Most of the things that have happened here at West Philadelphia Produce over the past 20 years, I wouldn't have been able to done without my son Devontae. I probably wouldn't even have done this if it hadn't have been for him, because I'd have probably been still living a different life, and I wouldn't have changed my lifestyle to the way that it changed based off having a son that I'm raising from 2 weeks old. It wasn't all juicy and glory and all of that. He'll be able to tell you some of the good parts and bad parts, because the book that I'm writing now is called The Black Sheep of the City. But even at home, I was the black sheep of my family. So my son knows what I've been through. He's seen, and he knows. But he knows that I'm there for him. He's been here for me. He's there for his brother and his sister. And he's a good guy, and he's just basically somebody I'm very, very proud of, and just glad that I had him as a son, because he made it easy. He just don't know, what some parents have to go through. I've never had to go to court. I've never had to bail him out of jail. I've never had to talk to my son from through a glass window or anything like that. Basically, that's what I want to say about my son, is that him turning 31 and me having the opportunity to raise him, you'll be able to hear about more of this when my book is released. There's a whole chapter, and then my book will also be co-authored by him, because a huge part of it will be some of, what he thinks. He'll be the co-author of my book, The Black Sheep of the City, because I'm going to give him an opportunity. I'll be 60 this year. He's 31, so he's been with me half my life. So he'll get a chance to talk about how it was being raised by Arnett Woodall. I'm a scholar on underserved communities, named by the University of Penn. A lot of organizations and affiliates around the country call me the model for all underserved communities across the country. I don't care what anybody call me. Some people call me a hero for saving lives. I just like to hear my son call me dad. That's all I want to be called, and that's what I like to be called, just dad. And he still calls me dad to this day, and raising him was a pleasure. Thank you. I'm Arnett Woodall. We'll see you soon on the next episode.